In the nature of the treatise to be composed, it has two aspects. The first one is the preliminaries, and the preliminary talks about the manner of entering into the Dharma, and then the part 2 talks about the main context, or the main part, demonstrating the path of the three kinds of beings. The first part is divided in terms of 7, and then it talks about the body that we have is well endowed, and we should use this human body to practice all the virtuous deeds. Otherwise, it would be quite a pity to squander it. In the verse, it says that at this time of having obtained the rare great ship of freedom and riches, to listen, reflect, and meditate without any distraction day and night, in order to liberate oneself and others from the ocean of samsara, is the practice of bodhisattvas. Now that we have already obtained the human body endowed with 8 kinds of freedom and 10 riches, which resembles a great ship, the 8 freedoms and the 10 riches resembles the great ship. Now, this body, from the 3 aspects, example, enumeration, and causes, from these 3 aspects, we can see that it's very difficult to obtain such a human body. But we have already obtained such a well-favored human body. Through this attainment, the great objectives of liberation and omniscience can be accomplished. The human body is really essential for us to obtain liberation and omniscience. If we were to obtain the animal body or the celestial being's body, we would no longer have any kinds of the causes and conditions. It would be difficult for us to have the causes and conditions that would be inducive for us to obtain the 3 bodhis. There is no other supreme bodies other than the human body. So being a human is really crucial. For that reason, when we have already obtained this human body, one should not let this support go waste through engaging in pointless and trivial objectives. Do not squander your time in those pointless and trivial objectives. Rather, in order to liberate oneself and others from the immense ocean of samsara, one should listen to the oral instructions of a spiritual friend of the great vehicle. And moreover, one should reflect upon the meaning of these instructions and analyze them by means of the 4 kinds of reasoning. One should practice all of these with great exertion. It would be difficult to exert ourselves at all time. It is very difficult, I understand. Sometimes I can see our Khenpos and Khenmos would get very diligent for a few days and then they would slack off. For that reason, I think having classes every day is really quite wonderful. Otherwise, we would be just like wanderers, have no objective, have no classes. If we were to sleep through the day and squandering our time without attending to classes, listening to the turning of the voice of turning the wheel of Dharma, that is quite sad. As long as you do not have some severe illness, as long as you're not enduring some great obstacles, nowadays we still have the merit to listen to one class, to listen to classes. In fact, not many people would be able to have that causes conditions to have the merit of listening to even one class. We know that causes and conditions can change at any time, just as we studied that in the Shrangama Sutra. We never know how the causes and conditions would change. In fact, if you can study over here for a month or for one class, it is still quite crucial. It is very important. It should be taken quite seriously, as how the beings in this world would feel that if they can go abroad to study in different countries for a month or a year, they would really cherish such kinds of opportunities. We ourselves also came here to study the Dharma with a sense of responsibility. It is not that we can stay here forever. So you shouldn't take this opportunity very lightly. Now, to reflect on the meaning of the instructions, analyze them, practice upon them, then finally one meditate about correctly bring the instructions to mind. This process should be engaged in at all times without any distraction, day and night. Such is the practice whereby all bodhisattvas make their freedom and riches meaningful. This is the practice of a bodhisattva. Furthermore, from the Sutra of the Ornamental Array, becoming a human being is a difficult attainment. Attaining the perfect pure freedoms is even more difficult. From the way of the bodhisattva, the freedoms and riches are extremely difficult to obtain. They accomplish the purpose of human existence. In the translation, the Chinese translation, I think the translation of the way of the bodhisattva is translated into five Chinese characters per stanza instead of 7. When I was translating the Beacon of Certainty, initially I wanted to translate it as 7 characters per stanza, but then translated it as 5 characters per stanza because it could be easier to memorize, though a little bit difficult to understand. But it sounds much better. 7 words per stanza may be easier to understand, but difficult to recite. Also, in the way of the Bodhisattva, it says that based on the ship, the human body, one becomes liberated from the great river of suffering. Letter to a Friend by Narajuna states that since it is extremely difficult to obtain human birth, by practicing the holy Dharma, Lord of humans, make it meaningful. Now we can see that there are so many quotes. The author quoted a variety of quotes, the ones from the Buddha, the quotes from the great Indian masters. So we can see that the author is quite knowledgeable, and it is said that he recites them and then can scribe them right away on the paper. And then further, the words freedoms and the riches are the representations of the freedom, and riches are essential qualities. The words a great ship, and in order to liberate oneself and others from the ocean of samsara indicates the great purpose of the freedom and riches. As to what beings wish for, it is a truly elevated life of a God and human being, and a definitive good of liberation, or the supreme definitive good of omniscience, of the ultimate enlightenment. Whatever one wants to accomplish, one can do so by means of the support. From the various kinds of aspects, the enumeration and then the examples and the causes and conditions, we can see that it is very rare to obtain human body. So as for the phrase rare, it is rarity that is demonstrated by means of example, enumeration, and cause. Phrases such as without distraction day and night, and to listen, reflect, and meditate points out that one needs to strive in the Dharma in order to take full advantage of which one has obtained. It is difficult to obtain such a support in the future, such kinds of a body in the future, if one does not endeavor in it now. The way of the Bodhisattva says the following: if one does not accomplish its purpose in this life, this ship will be difficult to find in the future. And then furthermore, from the unequaled great Lord Atisha, the body of the perfect freedoms and riches difficult to obtain has been obtained. Since it will be extremely difficult to obtain it in the future, by persisting in practice, it should now be made meaningful. I think in terms of sleeping, 6 hours should be sufficient. I really hope that you can fully use the causes and conditions, especially since it is in your favor right now. Some of our practitioners, I see that you sleep more than the time that you would use in your actual practice. So I really wish that you could reduce some of your sleeping time. There are lots of people that's very diligent in recitation, in memorizing the sutras, and in practice, which really remind me of Larungar that's 20 or 30 years back. Now we have already reached this age. It's difficult for me to engage in recitation and giving presentations of Dharma teachings, so on and so forth. But when I think back of that period of time, I feel that it was such a precious period of my life and experience. It was filled with happiness and meaning. The other day I mentioned that it's difficult for many people to act appropriately over here. You do not dress or wear your hat or walk like the Tibetan Lamas and Jomos, and sometimes it could bring difficult situations to you. We need to remember that we're simply actors. Wherever we are, we can act in a way that would not create difficulties for us. You understand that? So let's continue. Then Lord Adisha also said that the body that is of perfect freedom and riches difficult to obtain has been obtained. Since it will be extremely difficult to obtain in the future, by persisting in practice, it should now be made meaningful. Druntumpa also said, sometimes it's called as a Geshe. He is renowned as a Geshe, but Druntumpa is a lay practitioner. He is not a monastic. It is a little bit different to address him than the other Geshis. What he says is that this support with its freedoms and riches is exceedingly difficult to obtain. It is so rare to encounter the teachings of the Lord Buddha. Hence, you must not waste the freedoms and riches so difficult to obtain. Druntumpa once asked Chen Angwa, do you contemplate the attainment of the human body with its freedom and riches? Chen Angwa then answered, when I think about the difficulty of obtaining the freedoms and riches, I find no time to sleep and leisure. After understanding that it is so difficult to obtain a perfect human body, then I really don't want to sleep or wasting my time in leisure. Langri Tangwa, some of the Geshis, they really didn't sleep for their whole life. For us, if we don't sleep for 2 or 3 days, we have to sleep for a very long period of time to get those sleeping hours back. We can see that Chen Angwa is indeed quite an advanced practitioner. He said he has no time for sleep or leisure. If Chen Angwa were to see us sleeping till noontime on our weekend, he would definitely laugh at us because we have no idea of how difficult our human body, how difficult it is to obtain such a perfect human body. What is so meaningful about having a Sunday? It is more meaningful to practice with this human body. And then after he said that, the account states that he remained exclusively in meditation. When alternating between his practices, he recited, if, when free and enjoying conducive circumstances, one does not take firm hold of oneself, one falls into the abyss and becomes dependent, how then can one even rise again? This is This is a verse included in the Madhyamikavatara. I hope that you can remind yourself by using this shloka so that you know at the times that we still have freedom and all the favorable conditions to engage in practice, we need to practice with the right mindfulness and then practice persistently. Otherwise, if we were to fall into the places where no Dharma is taught, there's no freedom whatsoever. If we were to be reborn as hell-realm beings or animals, or if we were to be reborn as such poor beings, how could we obtain any causes and conditions to attain liberation? For that reason, we need to create more favorable conditions at the time when we still have freedom. We need to memorize it. We studied this in the Madhyamikavatara, and Pansuk Rinpoche used to recite this very often. I'm sure many of you hear this very often and get very familiar with it. But do you remind yourself with that? I hope that in the 37 practices of a Bodhisattva classes, you can write down maybe one quote, maybe one shloka, maybe one story to encourage yourself. In this way, it could be beneficial to you. Now that we have this precious human body, now that we have this precious freedom, now we have the kind of understanding of practicing the virtue and abandoning the vice. If we do not practice diligently, at the times of falling into the lower realms, if at the times we cannot save ourselves, at the times we have no freedom, what can we do? There is no way for us to save ourselves, just as if you were to be already locked up in a prison, then you have no power to save yourself anymore. So I hope you can contemplate upon it, and then these kinds of shlokas will be meaningful. There is a little bit of there is a typo in the Chinese translation. If one falls into the abyss and becomes dependent, how then can one ever attain liberation again? This is important to remember. Chingawa Geshe would use their prayer wheels every day and then chant this verse every day. Whenever Atisha visits him, he's always engaging in those virtuous activities.